We're on now. Hey, Gavin, how you doing?
Hi, good Shannon. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Um, so yeah, it's a trip to see your book. The version that I have is from a while ago, which doesn't really appear so much, but it's a couple hundred pages of a printout. So it's neat to see the final real book that in the final form is just a beautiful piece, and congratulations on it too, by the way.
Thank you very, very much.
How does it feel to have a printed final book like that?
It's wild. It's wild. I mean, we were speaking a little bit right before we started, and it's sort of a given expectation that it takes 8 to 10 years to train to become a ballet dancer. So I did that, and then I became a ballet dancer, and then it took me 10 years to write this book, and now I got this book. And it's just, it's really remarkable to me. I really never sort of thought it was actually going to happen, and here it is.
When did you think, like, you were dancing, did you think back then, oh, eventually I'll write a book about this? When did the seed start to germinate of I'm gonna write a full 200 page plus book?
It never did. It never did. So yeah, it wasn't like I retired from performing and sat down the next day and said, I write my book. It really happened in fits and starts, and the process is actually kind of interesting. I began by just wanting to capture the memories that were coming back to me not long after I retired. And
Hmm.
I realized that I felt actually scared that every day that passed between now and my dancing days, those memories would slip further and further out of my fingers. And there were so many of them, and they were so rich. And so I started writing them down, and they were very short. I mean, a page or 2 pages, maybe at the most. And I didn't think of them at all as a cohesive. It was really just almost like journaling after the fact. I never journaled while I was dancing, but this was like me scrambling to do those journal entries I had never done. And um, after a while, I realized I had amassed 5 or 6 or 7 of these essays. And to back up a little bit more, I come from kind of a literary family. My father is a writer and my mother was an editor. And I grew up in that environment. And so I showed them these pieces to my folks, and they said, well, these are interesting. Other people might be interested in these too. You should think about, stringing them together or something. And, it was a very long process, but I did end up getting a few of them published in literary journals. And I kept going with them. And eventually, after 10 years, started pasting them together into a book. And so it was like a patchwork quilt. It really, and that's what it is. It's a patchwork quilt of pieces that I did absolutely independently and then figured out how to sew them together. And I did it that way for one reason being I thought it was going to be easier, and it wasn't. The process of figuring out how to patch the pieces together in a nice way that made sense to me and made sense to the reader wasn't as easy as I thought. And at one point, I literally resorted to printing out each individual section, like I said, there are a page or two, spreading them all out on the living room floor and like moving the papers around because I had to visualize it. I had to see it. And,
Yeah,
that was kind of worthless, but it did come together, and now we do have this book.
that's great. I love it. When you were dancing, was your dad, who's a writer, or your mom is an editor? I mean, were they encouraging, like, oh, you should write more about that? Like, were they pushing you to be a writer from a dancer?
No, 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 not at all. It was all me. I mean, they were encouraging. They were encouraging, and they said these are interesting pieces, and you really think that more people would be interested in them too. But they were never like, you got to do it, you got to do it. I mean, it was I got the ball. Once the ball got rolling, I got more into it as well, and I just kept thinking of more and more angles from which I could approach it and could express it, and different ways to express it. So like the pieces in this book, the chapters are not all told in my voice. And they're told, like, I jump around chronologically. They're from various perspectives. And I did that as a way of actually protecting myself and making myself feel emboldened to be completely forthright and can be completely open and not feel shy. I mean, I thought that if I told the whole thing in the first person voice, I would hold back. And so that's why,
Interesting.
for example, the early sections are all told in third person, because
Yeah.
it's sort of like performing. I mean, as a performer, you have that buffer zone between you and the audience of the fact that it's in the theater and you have a costume on and you're portraying a character and you're doing someone else's choreography. And that emboldened me as a dancer to be completely invested. And as a writer, using different voices made me feel brave enough to express and to say in words everything I want to say, but it wasn't necessarily coming from me.
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense. Was it an editor that came in and said, "Hey, why don't you try this?" Or was this something that you thought of on
Oh
your
no,
own, of like, this will work for me?
no. That was just, it was my instinct. It was just my instinct. And that, in fact, the first person parts of the book were done because of pressure from editors. They said, readers, you can't call it a memoir if there's nothing in your voice. Like, the reader needs to feel you. And so that's why I ended up doing, a lot of it is in my voice, but I would say, I don't know, maybe half and half.
That was my favorite parts were the part where you did speak in your own voice. I really liked
Well,
hearing that personal expression from you.
yeah, let me read the preface, which is in my own voice. And I wrote this preface at the very, very end. It was like one of the last pieces I wrote was the preface, which is sort of silly.
Really? Oh,
Yeah, but
wow.
it was because, the editors and the publisher said we need an entree.
Yeah.
And, originally I had begun with like the 8-year-old, which is me wandering to the studio lost. And they said, we need a little context here. And so here is the preface. On May 2nd, 2010, I retired. My life as a dancer, which had formally begun at around age 8 when I took my first fateful ballet class, although according to my parents, I had been dancing for long before that, was officially over. Perhaps because I quite simply could not fear that which was incomprehensible, I was filled with joy and a surprising calmness on the day that was actually a small death. In the ballet world, we grapple for an accurate descriptor of this inevitable yet inconceivable event. We say that a dancer is retiring or giving her farewell performance. It's her swan song. She hangs up her pointe shoes, takes her final bow. There's no reason why, for the dancer herself, there has to be one last finale, a triumphant conclusion after which there will be no more appearances on stage in pointe shoes in front of an audience. She will wake up the next morning exactly the same body, the same talents, the same artistry, the same aches and pains, the same corns and calluses. Most of those things erode ever so slowly, though still more quickly than they were built. But her mentality, psyche, and her deep, deep body of knowledge live forever. This is part of why a final farewell performance is such a conundrum for the dancer. It's a public declaration that tomorrow I will not be a dancer anymore, but I know that's not true. I will be exactly the same, but my name tag will have been peeled off. People often said to me that when I retired, I would, quote, find myself, which I took to mean that I might discover other aspects of my spirit that had been squished down, that had remained hidden or dormant while I was busy being a dancer. But as I suspected would be the case, the opposite has been true. I've always known who I am. Spending most of my time wrapped up in dance and all the peripheral things that it required did not hide me from myself. But now, when I look back in time, what I wonder is just who exactly that dancer person was. I'm in awe and even disbelief sometimes that she and I are the same being. My dancer self really does feel like a she, another person inside me, like a Russian nesting doll. Uncovered then, but now sheathed in an outside layer that looks exactly the same, but is just a shell. The further I look back through the years, the more removed I feel from that person. The stories of my beginnings on the path of dance, particularly, seem just that, stories of someone else's life, only possibly my own. I don't know who that little 8, 9, 10-year-old girl was, but maybe by telling her story from my vantage point now, as a 45-year-old on the other side of a dancing life, we can figure it out together.
It's nice. It really gives a personal view as well as something that's really universal, and it's nicely intimate, and yeah, it's really powerful. It was really poignant to read that. When I read it the first time, it kind of broke my heart.
It's interesting, Shannon. I mean, I've heard that from dancers and non-dancers alike. And that was a big aim and goal of mine. It still is for this book, is to touch and reach people and resonate with people who are not necessarily dancers or artists. I mean, you're an artist, of course, but I mean, I think that anyone and all of us have felt that, like, that mysterious kind of inner force that just pushes you through a challenge or a hardship or a conundrum. And even if you don't know exactly what the goal is, there's some inner force driving you. And I think by illustrating what that is for a dancer and how a dancer finds that and cultivates it, I mean, I think that could help other people find their own and cultivate it for themselves or reignite it for themselves.
When I looked, when I was going through your book, one of the things that really strikes me is just how much work you've put into it, into the career and the craft. And when we chatted ahead of time too, I asked you, I was like, do you think that this is necessary to be that dedicated in order to succeed at it? And I'll ask you again, how you threw all in, like you really dedicated yourself incredibly to doing this. And do you feel, I guess the two questions I have is like, is that something that one has to do in order to hit a professional level of dancing?
Oh yeah, it is.
And then the second thing is, are there any regrets on it?
Oh gosh, no.
I love that. I just love that.
And it's funny because people often talk, it's sort of stereotype to talk, or cliche to talk about the sacrifices that you have to make to become a dancer or an elite anything. Yeah. People always say, oh, you have to sacrifice so much as a child and as a young adult. And no, you don't sacrifice anything. I remember, as a teenager, and people saying, you sacrifice so much, you give up so much, you miss so much. No way. I felt sorry for the other kids who didn't get to go to ballet every day after school, and who didn't get to perform, on stage, and who didn't get to live that existence. I felt sorry for them. I had no interest in going to the sports games or going to the prom or hanging out after school, doing nothing. All I wanted was to do this. And so it never felt like a sacrifice. I mean, it was a gift, absolutely a gift to be able to do this. So yeah, you do have to throw yourself all in, but it's not a choice. It's just something you do. It's not like, I could throw myself all in, or I could, I don't know, not do that. There was really no question.
I love it. That's great. And I mean, but you're still bringing all these experiences of life and these universal things into your dance. And so you're bringing these emotions. You still have a wide range of emotions that you've had a full set of experiences. What's your favorite? I mean, do you feel it's interesting because you went through this one art form and had a dance career, still have one, really. I mean, I hate putting it in past tense, but then you're writing about it, and so now you're looking at it through a different lens, and it's really powerful in part because you have these two perspectives on something.
Yeah. It's been really interesting to write about it, exactly like you said, like approach dancing from a different perspective, like looking back on it now, yet reliving it at the same time. And it's been, honestly, I'm telling people, it's been like therapy. It's been like going to counseling, writing this book, because I'm figuring myself out. Or as I wrote it, I was figuring myself out as I relived the 8-year-old, the 9-year-old, the 10-year-old, the 15-year-old, the joining the company. As I really relived all of those, I was realizing like why I was the way I was, why I am the way I am. as a dancer, as a person. And it was totally like journaling after the fact, like I said before. And I learned a lot more about why, like what makes a dancer successful. It's the inner drive, yes, but it's also the ability to push yourself, and it can't feel like an effort. It doesn't. I mean, I think most artists will agree and attest to the fact that pushing yourself to achieve more and to fine tune your craft, it doesn't feel like an effort. I mean, yeah, okay, it's an effort, it's hard, but it's not something you're like, oh, I gotta do this. Like I said before, it's, you just do it. And it's interesting, I saw a quote yesterday from someone somewhere, I can't even remember where, but they said that a challenge is something that you don't have the choice about going through. And versus people say, like, I want to challenge myself, so I'm going to create this obstacle that I need to, go through in order to become a stronger person. But I agree that a challenge is something that is presented to you and you have no choice but to navigate. And that's the way, becoming a dancer is. It's challenging, yes, but it's not like you're willingly saying, I'm going to make this harder and harder and harder for myself. You just go through these stages and you just do it. I hate to be like Nike, but you just do it.
Yeah, there's a cheap what were the parts that just felt easily to you, where you started doing it and saying, hey, this is giving me more than I'm giving it?
Oh, I mean, I think, well, all of it. I mean, it was not easy. I'm not saying that at all. I mean, if you read the book, you'll see it's like every stage is like hard. It's hard. Every stage of it, I'm like facing all of these conundrums and figuring it out. What made it doable for me was the music. And that's a huge theme throughout the book, is the way the dancer, I partnered with music the whole time, every step of the way. And I remember so vividly, certain classes are drier than others. And I remember so vividly one particular day, just kind of, going through, and then suddenly the pianist played some piece of music that was like really rousing and melodic and forceful. And it was probably like, the Marseillaise or something like that. And we're doing,
I was going to ask, what was it? You got to tell me.
I'm pretty sure it was that. I'm pretty sure it was the French anthem. And I was suddenly like, hi-ya, I can do this. And, it's those moments of like power that just really refuel your efforts.
And what were some of the hard parts? What the thing that you had to struggle through and say, I can't do this today? And then obviously you pushed through and did it anyway.
Well, maybe the injuries. And I mean, there's a section here called the 16-year-old's epiphany, which explains, as a teenager, I kind of hit this moment of plateau and of complacency. And a certain teacher in my school really, really opened my eyes to what I was doing wrong, and that I was stagnating and was not actually pushing myself anymore. I thought I was, but I wasn't actually. I wasn't going for it with my eyes open. I was being more of like a sheep, just kind of waiting to be herded along, instead of opening my eyes and taking some initiative, moving forward. And so that was a big literal eye opener. And I mean, that did help me as I went forward throughout my career.
So having good teachers makes a big difference. I mean, they saw that, okay, when you say stagnating, do you think that you were taking shortcuts or being lazy in a certain way? Or
I was being mentally lazy. I was very, very excellent student, very diligent and very attentive, but I was being mentally lazy in that I wasn't thinking for myself, and I was only taking the correction and applying them, and I wasn't carrying them forward to the next day or to the next exercise. And this one teacher in particular, who I explain in the book quite a bit about in that one chapter, 2 chapters, she like shook me awake to be like, that's not how you're going to get anywhere. You know, you have a lot of talent and potential, and unless you take the reins with it, a teacher can only get you so far.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the thing that is really interesting in your book, is how much of a physical act it is, but really the psychology of it and the mental aspect of it is super important.
It is. It is. And that's actually something that's interesting, to tie this between dancing and writing. You know, they're both silent art forms. I mean, except for the music, like the dancer is silent.
Yeah.
Voice, and a writer doesn't use your verbal voice. But in a way, they feel very similar to me, despite the fact of dance being physical and writing obviously being stationary. Because of what I explained a little bit earlier, there's that buffer zone between your presentation, your expression, and the audience. So, you know, as a dancer, like I said, you're on stage, you have the costume, you have the theatrical setting to kind of protect yourself. And as a writer, I felt the time delay between what I put on the page and what someone reads sort of helped me be brave. Using another voice helped me be brave. But also, you know, something I did feel was missing early on was a sense of community. So as a dancer, you work by yourself, but you are in community with other people in the room with you, in the studio with you, on stage with you, even though you're alone in your body. And in 2015, I was really, really fortunate to get awarded a residency to an arts foundation in Taos, New Mexico. And I went there for 3 months and like got a bunch of this book written. And what was so inspiring about that was that I was, yes, alone working on my project, but I was in the company of other artists who were also working on their projects. And so I felt, for the first time, I felt valid as a writer, because I had been accepted into this community, not as a dancer, but as another type of artist and expressionist. And that really motivated me, if I hadn't been already before, to, in the same way that I had been motivated as a dancer.
I love it.
Yeah. So
Do you have another part? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, we should explain a little bit about your and my relationship to our audiences, because
I was going to have you read another part of your book, but
I will do that right now. So Shannon, I think I've told some of you who are watching tonight, Shannon is the co-star of chapter 54 in the book. And so those of you who have read the book already will chuckle, because you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But for everyone else, I'm just going to read this little bit of chapter 54, and then Shannon and I can maybe you'll have a question or a comment, Shannon.
Absolutely.
Okay, so chapter 54 is called A Boyfriend and a Cat. All of my previous injuries had been short-lived and minor. This time, the torn tissues in my ankle gave me no choice. It would not heal on its own, and after surgery, I would not be able to dance for weeks or even months. I was a little freaked out by the thought of being compromised for so long, so right away I started strategizing. Although I'd be on crutches, unable to bear weight on my left leg, anything lying down or on all fours was possible. So I devised a rigorous routine of ab, leg, and upper body work with my TheraBands. Within a few days of the surgery, I was religiously following my plan every morning and repeating aspects of it every afternoon. I was crafty and creative, and crutches were no obstacle to getting around my apartment. I hopped on my good leg instead of crutching from room to room, and used the kitchen counters to swing myself from refrigerator to stove. I crawled from living room to bathroom. I followed my schedule as unwavering as my dance days. Wake up, bath, with my booted leg wrapped in plastic bags and draped over the side of the tub. Tea, exercises, breakfast, email, lunch, a trip around the block on crutches to the coffee shop to read for an hour or two, home for round 2 of my exercises, the news, dinner, and on and on. I wasn't filling my time with such a regime only to make my ankle and body heal. Deep down, I knew I would lose the sense of purpose and self-worth that ballet gave me. I was trying to fill that void before it could crack my foundation, but it wasn't the same and it wasn't enough. As the hours passed slowly through the afternoons, I looked at myself. I was still the dancer, just an injured one. I was working on my dancer self every day, but not in the studio at the bar and not in Pointe shoes. That fact anchored me. But the dancer work I did in the form of rehab challenged me only physically. There was no holistic gratification. Ironically, that made motivation even harder. Getting myself up for a day of dancing was easy. The work itself distracted me from the effort I was putting in. But merely doing rote exercises while I knew there was benefit and they were worthwhile was pale and thin, and the endorphin spike momentary. I felt empty at the end of the days. Not bad, not worthless or depressed, not even bored, just plain, unmoved. For the first time ever, I saw the space that ballet occupied inside my soul. I pictured it as an actual thing inside my body, a long tube from head to toe that was usually coursing full of colorful fluid energy, but now was drained. I didn't see the need to fill that space really, since I was confident the weeks would pass and soon I'd slip right back into my previous existence. I was just on pause. Knowing that having the space in mind and body was temporary, I felt playful and even curious and like taking a bit of a risk. So I let my guard down and left the door ajar, and in came Tess and Shannon.
That was very sweet.
That's how I met Shannon. And Tess is cat, you might have figured out. So that also kind of expresses, what you were asking me earlier about, how much of yourself you really do put into the art form. And the moment it was taken away from me in that full aspect, I really did feel like I described, like empty, like a shell. And now that I have segued into writing more, that is being filled. And thank goodness, because I know, not all dancers are so lucky to find something else that can fill that void.
Yeah, I mean, but you're also teaching and then you're still dancing. I mean, to say, yeah, you're not performing in the same venue, but you're still dancing.
I am, and actually teaching is a huge part of that too. For me, teaching is like performing, and yeah, I have to say that teaching and writing together have filled that performance or the dancer performance part of me for sure. It's a two-pronged thing. Like every day that I teach a class and work with students, I feel like I'm writing a book again, because again, I'm reliving and telling them, explaining to them, and bringing them along in what was my journey too. And it's funny. I mean, I read something else this morning, another dancer talking about how teaching is a generous act, and it is, because as a performer, when all you're doing it is for yourself, your artistry is like your weapon. It's your power, it's your currency. And imparting that to someone else, it really is giving away your powers. I mean, you never fully give them away, but you're sharing with someone else your currency. And that's what writing this book has been like too.
When you're teaching though, doesn't it make you aware? I've heard this about teaching a lot. It makes you very aware of these things that you're doing unconsciously, and then all of a sudden you have an awareness and a deliberate act to something that was not deliberate. And so I see that teaching and writing as being an overlap. But does that, as you're moving into this stage of life, like the self-awareness is it's a nice thing to have and see. Does that make sense, or do you feel that? Or
I do absolutely. It is definitely a self-awareness. I mean, it's often said that dancers should teach before they stop dancing, because you learn so much about dancing in the act of trying to teach someone else how to do it. So, everything that I took for granted because it came naturally, learning how to express that in words, either to teach a student or to write about it, has been hugely illuminating. And like I said a little while ago, illuminating in terms of knowledge, self-knowledge, but also about my art form. And so that's been fun. And I mean, now that I'm, the book is done and I'm continuing, I mean, I write, still for magazine articles and things like that. And that's more like current events and current issues in the dance field. that too. I mean, the more I have to research an article and write about it, the more I learn about my own field. And so it's like a continual growth, and that's really important too.
I find it, remarkable that the self-awareness that you have on this. I'm wondering, did you have that, say, as a 16-year-old, where you had to make that decision, hey, I'm going to push myself to a new level and take what this teacher said and internalize it and make changes? I mean, was that the start of your self-awareness, or was that just something that you've had your whole life?
No, that was the start of it. I mean, well, I don't know. I'm not sure I should say that. I think maybe I had it and I had let it get dormant, just kind of in like a fit of adolescence.
Mhm.
Yeah, just in that adolescent haze. And I was like following along, and instead of being a self leader, I was following. And this one teacher, Susie Pilar, was the one who kind of shook me and was like, you have to be a leader for yourself and among others. You can be. You don't have to always be a follower. So yeah, I think I've always had that innately. But there have been periods of time, like that 16-year-old period, when I've let it fall dormant. But then later on, like after I became a professional, my ambition was like strong.
Yeah.
And I now find it, well, now always, I find it hard when I see other people who don't have that same strength of conviction. And I'm like, why not? You just go, you just keep going, you just keep going, you just keep going, you just don't stop. Like every time I switched companies and was looking for a new job, it's bleak. The landscape is bleak as a dancer looking for a new job. And it's so bizarre, but I don't remember ever feeling doubt that I would find another job.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Even though both, let's see, two times when I switched companies, I left the current job I had with nothing else in hand. So I didn't like secure my next job before I left the one that I had. And both times it worked out great. But I don't remember ever feeling like, oh my gosh, what if I never find another job? What if that's the end? The
Right,
only time I
right.
ever felt that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I think this could be the end of my life as a dancer, was when I had my second serious ankle injury.
And
And
what taught you to push through that? I mean, that's existential, to have an injury as a dancer like that. And where did you find the strength to go, okay, I'm going to have the faith that this will get better and I will be dancing again?
well, the previous injuries, I mean, the injuries before the one that I just read about with you when you came in the door, the ones before that, I was younger, and it just didn't feel like an existential threat. I
Mhm.
don't know. I was younger. Had lots of energy. I was very resilient. I just didn't see it as this could end things. But that one particularly, it was very sudden. It was very unusual. The doctors were like, I've never seen this before. We'll try to
Oh,
fix it.
wow.
No guarantees. And I was in a plaster cast for like weeks and weeks and weeks. And I remember standing, and I mean, it's written all in the chapter that follows, about that feeling of, I stood at the window of my bedroom looking out at the city thinking, I'm not sure I have the inner strength. It was terribly scary. The first time I didn't feel my inner strength. And I thought, I'm not sure I have the energy to push as hard as I normally have in the past to rehab from this. And I mean, I was like, I'm just going to take it one day at a time. You just do what you do every day. Don't look any further than one day. And one
Interesting.
day leads to the next day, leads to the next day. And I did come back, and I danced for another 2 years. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to get back.
It's a whole lot. And your career altogether lasted a lot longer. The lifespan of a dancer tends to be um, very short, and you had an incredible one that lasted a really long time.
I was lucky. Yeah, I was very lucky to dance as long as I did. There are, some dancers who can go longer, but I didn't want to. I was ready. I was totally ready. And when you read this book, you'll hear all about how I came to my decision to retire. And I was ready, even though I was also encouraged when the moment came. And I was surprised, yet not surprised. And, it was all good and it was all right. But it's hard. It's really,
Yeah.
it's really hard. And at that point, I didn't have writing I didn't know that was going to be what I was going to segue into. And, so it definitely felt scary, but, also sort of like going from job to job. At the same time, it wasn't scary. I knew I'd hang on to my dancer identity, and it felt very, very close. So I wasn't worried about losing it for some reason.
Did you have another piece that you wanted to read?
I do, yeah. This is throughout the book, I have several little like sort of introductory explanatory paragraphs leading into chapters. Mm-hmm. And this particular one, it's late in the book. It's right before chapter 51. But it was actually, I think, one of the very, very first pieces of writing I ever committed. And before I even began writing the book, Dance Magazine has a column that they run regularly called, it's a guest contributor column called Why I Dance. And I used to read it every single month religiously and think, how would I write that? What would I say? Yeah, if I was given the voice to express in writing why I dance, how would I do it? And so through a friend of mine, her name is Martha Olin West, she might even be watching right now. I asked her, how do you get in Dance Magazine? And she said, well, you write to the editor and you ask. And she gave me the editor's name and address, and I wrote and said, hi, I'm a dancer and I want to write this column. And Wendy Perrin said, well, sure, give it a shot and let me see. So I wrote a Why I Dance column, and she liked it and published it. And this is an excerpt from that. It's right before the chapter called A Highest Note. Everyone should dance. Everyone should let their soul sing. We all deserve to feel our spirits expanding past the boundaries of our skin, to be powerful without needing to hold power over anyone else. Dancing takes the most beautiful, extraordinary, and universal instrument, the human body, to its fullest, highest, most complete capacity. Physical body, intellectual mind, emotional spirit, interpretive artistry all unite in even the simplest classroom exercise. When I dance, I feel I'm sharing a gleeful, knowing chuckle with our Creator. I found the key to sublime paradise on earth, which He has masterfully hidden by putting it in the most obvious place, our muscles, tendons, bones, and indeed every cell of our bodies. When dancing, one need not go to church to seek out the divine. I found my spiritual salvation in the dance studio, and I'm not alone. Everyone should dance.
That's beautiful. I love it.
Thanks.
How unique do you think that you are? Like, is your personality just similar to all the dancers? Or, I mean, obviously there's a spectrum of personalities, but how, like you said, you found a community when you went to write, but then in dancing, how much of a community and how similar are the attitudes?
Well, everyone's individual, of course, and superficially, we're all wildly, wildly different all over the map. But a main theme of this book and a goal of mine in writing it was to express the one universal bond that all dancers share. And it's very hard to put words to. I tried. But it's this universal language, and you can meet another dancer from across the world and you don't speak the same language, you're from totally different cultures or countries or anything, ages, and you just get each other. You just get each other. You understand. You understand each other. You understand what makes each other tick. And it's that fascination with moving your body in that structured way that ballet provides. It's that fascination and compulsion and exhilaration from finding the freedom of movement through the structure and discipline of classical technique. It's the thrill and the emotion and the openness and the freedom of being on stage and of performing for people and feeding off of the energy of an audience, interpreting choreography, all of those things, the fascination with perfecting your tendu, and this like the exhilaration of a grand jeté, all of those things, you share. And it's no matter, if I'm talking to a dancer who's Russian and 85 and totally different from me, we have that commonality. And the dancers who have read this book so far and talked to me about it say the descriptions that I read, even though it's my experiences, the specifics of them are mine, but they're just like, I'm going back into my own body as I read it. And that to me is everything.
That's nice. And it's oddly universal too. I mean, it's really specific in terms of what you're talking about, but then it resonates outward into, yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head a number of times. I would have thought that you would have said the dedication or the drive, and it's really interesting that you say no, it's a fascination, not a dedication. That's the universal thing.
Yeah, it's definitely the fascination with the specifics of the art form itself.
I love it. That's so nice. Did we have a question that's coming in, or?
Excellent, you should ask. We do. We've got some questions from the audience. The first question, did you know from the beginning that what you were working on was going to be a book? And if you didn't know it was going to be a book, when did you realize it was going to be one?
I did not know it was going to be a book at all. It was a series of essays, and as they accumulated and they got bigger and bigger, it was actually my parents that suggested it could become a book. And I thought, that sounds cool. Let me see. And so I kept going. And that's when I got serious about it. And I'm not formally trained as a writer at all. I did go to school for it, but I did take a memoir writing workshop at the Attic Institute in Portland, Oregon. And that's where several pieces that are now chapters in this book were generated. And by that point, I did have the idea that I was going to write it in this form, series of essays and reminiscences and memories and reflections, and then string them together. So it was a long evolutionary process, but I definitely did not start out thinking it was going to be a book.
What were some of the other books that you looked at as templates and thinking, yeah, this could work as a book? What inspired you?
Nothing. I inspired myself. I mean, there was really, I was inspired by the fact that I didn't know any other book written this way. I didn't want to write a memoir. I definitely didn't want to write a memoir because my own dancing life distilled, like written as a regular memoir, would not be that exciting or interesting at all. I mean, lots of dancers have much more colorful dance performance lives than I did. And so I wanted to write a compelling dance story in a different way. And so that's why I tried to make it unique.
There's another question sort of related to that, and something that I'm also curious about. What is the what have the conversations been like that this book has opened up for you with either other ballet dancers or performers in other disciplines?
The biggest, most common, and definitely the most heartwarming response I'm getting from other dancers is that they see themselves in this book and that they feel such resonance with the concepts that I'm expressing in these different episodes. And some people are saying that's like therapy for them too. And some of it, some of it's painful. It's not all about the glory at all. I mean, it's also not all about the pain. I mean, it's about the mental challenges and emotional challenges. And I think that's the most interesting feedback I'm getting from a lot of the dancers. And then from non-dancers, I'm hearing that, they're really compelled by the story, even though they're not necessarily interested in the facets of the dancing life in itself, necessarily the details, but they're just compelled by the the intensity of it.
Yeah. I mean, that was something I was struck by just listening to you, that I definitely think that I had internalized a lot of, popular cliches, popular images of, the archetypal kind of tragic former prima ballerina, and it was interesting to hear you push back on some of those images, and particularly in the essay that you read for us, the Why I Dance essay, where you made complex that question of what is the body, and kind of what I think is often presented as a commodification of the body in performance, that you saw instead as a kind of empowerment, as like your body was the art.
That is exactly it, Charles. You hit the nail on the head right there. It's a very difficult dynamic to navigate as a dancer, because your body is your tool and your instrument and your voice, but it's also yours. And so you're allowing, as an interpretive artist, you're allowing a choreographer to use your tool, but you're the one who gets to hold it and use it. So it's as if, a painter was telling me how to do their painting, how to create their painting using my own brush. But so, you do struggle with feeling like a commodity at times. And actually there's a chapter in here that kind of goes into that, in terms of some elements about like costuming and feeling like an item, and instead of feeling like a self-autonomous dancer. But I really, really shied away from highlighting any of the, the gory stuff that is like in the TV shows and the movies and blah, 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 because first of all, a lot of it's highly exaggerated and frankly untrue. And it's all been done. If you want to know about like the bloody toes in the Pointe shoes, like go watch one of the TV shows. Yeah, sure, that happens from time to time, but it's not that big a deal, to be frank. To me, like the drama is inherent in the dancing itself.
Right.
Beautiful. That's what I liked a lot about the book, is that you really do emphasize the dancing, and that it is about the art form itself and not about the distractions of it. It's how do you get rid of these distractions to focus on the art, and to me that's what makes it very universal, is that you're talking about art as a priority, which I loved. I thought it was great.
Which is an excellent segue for the next question. A common theme, I think, in a lot of questions, and another thing that I'm very curious about anytime that we bring on someone that deals in two very distinct or seemingly distinct art forms, that then through exploring it with them, we realize kind of have a lot of overlap. It seems like you've addressed a bit, Gavin, how the writing allowed you to reassess the dancing. Are there any specifics about how the dancing allowed you to reassess writing, or that guided your writing in particular ways?
That's an interesting question. I had not really thought about that, but I think my dancing style influenced my writing style. So, I mean, I think I write like I danced, which is pretty bold for someone that is in nature a little bit introverted. I definitely didn't hold back on stage. In fact, being on stage, I would dance bigger and more boldly than I would in the studio. And I think I do that as a writer too. I don't hold back. I feel very, very open to be like blunt. And then I go back and I have to fine tune it. So as a dancer, you fine tune in the studio and then you put it out there. But as a writer, I'm blunt first, and then I fine tune it afterwards. I don't know if that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And I guess I'd be curious to hear from you, Shannon, about not exactly the same thing, but something similar, like as someone that also dabbles in sort of multiple, artistic imperatives, aesthetic imperatives. How do you see the relation between all that you do?
Yeah, I think one of the cartoonists that I admire said that being a cartoonist is being a not very good writer and a not very good artist, and then makes you a cartoonist, which it was snarky. I think it was Wally Wood or something, who's one of the best cartoonists out there. Um, yeah, I think that there is a basic drive. I think Gavin's absolutely right, where there's something that is very pure and inside. And what she's doing of this is her personality of being bold in a way, being an introvert, but then she's being very bold. I think that is something that Picasso or somebody said that drawing a circle is, drawing a circle, but how you draw the circle is the artwork. And just that is something that's really interesting. And to me, that resonated of she said how she dances is how she writes, and then the refinement later and all that. That's it totally resonates. And I think that's why in part her book is very specific in terms of dancing and the artwork, but then it makes it relatable for me even to read the book and say, oh yeah, this is a lot of things I recognize as metaphor, if not the specifics, but it was real universal. So I guess personality is what it boils down to.
Yeah, well, and speaking of personality, I think that sort of the thing that sort of separates the wheat from the chaff, or whatever that expression is something that Ira Glass said about how the tragedy of the artistic imperative is that starting out your taste is way greater than your ability, and that sort of true artistry comes about when you kind of achieve an equilibrium of like what you like and what you're capable of. So Gavin, do you think that there was a clear point in either in your dancing or your writing or both when you felt that kind of equilibrium, or were you ever conscious of when those coincided?
Yeah, I was. It was close to the end of my performance career when I really felt that I had learned enough, not enough, you never know enough, but I had learned a lot, and I was really starting to feel enlightened about artistry and not just technique. I was obsessed with technique my whole time dancing, obsessed. And it's because it's the foundation. You can't be an artist without technique. And I think at times I over-focused on it, but the last couple years of my performance career, I really felt the two merging and coming together. And some performances from those last couple of years, I'll treasure forever. I'll never forget, because I really felt like I was able to be completely expressive and forget about the technique, which is really what it's all about. You want to be able to do that. Just forget about the technique, know that it's there, and just be expressive. And what's cool is that, now I feel like I can kind of take that forward into writing. And I think I did as I started working on the book.
And so this would be for both of you. What once we're finished with Gavin's book, what should we be reading next? Let's start with you, Gavin. What do you recommend for us if we want to know more?
Oh, if you want to know more about
dance or anything that you think that we be reading?
Okay. Okay. Well, I think Patricia might have put it in the chat. I'm not sure. There's a book called Celestial Bodies by Laura Jacobs that I read a while ago. It's fairly recent, and I just thought it was a really wonderful. It's like it's sort of a dance history, but not dry and technical in that way. And she uses beautiful imagery and metaphor to explain how the history and historical evolution of ballet coincided with the artistic development of it. And it's just really beautiful expressions of like why an arabesque is like it is, and why a pirouette is like it is, and why things are called what things they are, and why certain things are done certain ways. And I learned a ton about my own craft from reading it. So Laura Jacobs, Celestial Bodies.
Yeah, when we were talking before the event, immediately you sold me on that. It's on my TBR now.
Oh, good.
I ordered a copy as well.
Yeah, you should get into book selling. You're very good at it. Do you have any future projects you'd like to, tease us with, or, maybe a new art form you're going to take on next?
I don't know about a new art form, though I'm dabbling in tap dancing, and I want to get back into that a little bit more. But I do hope I can write another book. like kind of tormenting me right now that I don't know what it's going to be, and I don't have anything started. I've been so focused on this one for the past like 10 years that I can't even think about another one, but I want to, and I hope that there is another one in me. I hope I'm not just a one-hit wonder. But I mean, for now, I'm, I have some ideas. But nothing is fully formed at all.
Well,
I'm confident that you'll have another book. I think.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
But
so we have one final question, and it's a very specific request. Someone has asked, I hope we have the time for it, if you would read the last 5 paragraphs of The Highest Note.
Oh, all right.
mm,
Let me find it. The last 5 paragraphs. That is very specific. I have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a lot. Okay. Do we have time?
Yeah, we should be okay.
It's like a page.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. All right, here we go. Safe is an illusion, though I never feel vulnerable in Artur's hands. His palms are wide, his fingers long. His 6'4" height makes me feel tiny in comparison, my head barely reaching his shoulder. So I often wonder if this is a feeling of being a bird. For our shared center line and go for more turns. Each pirouette into the back bend is its own mini climax, stepping stones toward the inevitable purpose of the pas de deux. I gradually lift my arms while we're pirouetting, dangerously close to his face with my elbows, into a first arabesque, and then we're there. A quick, small saute takes me to our upstage spot. Artur takes the long route. He hangs back until I've arrived so I can watch his exuberant, enormous solo grand jeté aimed right to where I'm waiting for him to join me. He lands and steps right beside me, matching my pose, and as we do our huge port de bras in unison, arms circling up, forward, and down, to the last 4 notes of the scale's ascension, our 2 bodies are one. Artur's hand at my waist is warm, his grip firm and encouraging. And then suddenly I'm aloft, unfolding my legs into a full split, arms overhead, reaching my feet and stretching my limbs for eternity, every cell driven by the power of the orchestra raging under us like the waves of an ocean. Ever since I walked on stage at the start of the pas de deux, my thoughts have been a fast-moving, shifting stream of second-by-second calculations and adjustments. I hadn't consciously told myself what step came next. My body knew the choreography on its own. Sensations like the heat of the stage lights, a glimpse of someone in the wings, and the roughness of the fabric of Artur's tunic against my skin registered distantly, well below the current. But suddenly, at the height of the lift and on that one magnificent note, everything was crystal clear. This is the apex of life. This is the happiest a person on earth can be. This is perfection. I may never be this happy again, and that's okay. That's it.
Well, now I see why they wanted you to read that. That was beautiful.
that's great.
And what a perfect note to end on. That was really gorgeous. And, I can always tell it was a wonderful event when I leave, not wanting it to end and above new ideas. So thank you both. Everyone, on behalf of everyone at the store, we're really appreciative that both of you were so generous with your time to be here with us. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Shannon. And a reminder to all of you out there, if you've not bought Gavin's book yet, there's a link in the chat for you to do so. So please do so now. That's, very recommended idea. And also check out Shannon's work, which we've also linked you to. And once again, thank you both.
Thank you, Charles and Patricia and everyone at Malaprops. I really appreciate your giving us this opportunity. And thank you, everybody.
It was a privilege, and that was great. It was so nice to hang out and chat.